Welcome everyone to the NAACP Pennsylvania State Conference Virtual Town Hall, where we are focusing on the impact of COVID-19 on communities of color. Last week, if you tuned in, we talked to local, state, and federal officials and leaders, and we continue on in that conversation this evening, where we have more of a direct focus with political action and civic engagement. But before we begin, I do want to briefly review Zoom etiquette. For those of you who are a little new to Zoom, some of you are probably zoomed out, I imagine, by now. But with Zoom etiquette, we are aware that there is a risk of disruption for our meetings. It has become known as Zoom bombing. Please know that we are aware of this risk and we will take care of it as expeditiously as possible in the event that a disruption occurs. So please hang on and we will take care of it in the event that a disruption occurs. We invite all attendees to place your comments in the chat section, or if you have a question directly pertaining to what one of the presenters had said, please utilize the Q&A box. There should be a little Q&A icon at the bottom of the screen. And I invite our, I'm going to invite our presenters, everyone who is not talking, to continue to mute themselves in order to reduce background noise. All right. Also, I just want to quickly review our roster. We do have a full roster for this evening. So this evening will feature Congressman, the Honorable Dwight Evans, Congressman Representative, Pennsylvania 3rd District, Senator Art Haywood, Pennsylvania State Senator for the 4th District, Norman Bristol Cologne, Executive Director, Governor, Census 2020 and Complete Count Commission of Pennsylvania Department of Community and Economic Development. Dan Jurman, Executive Director of Advocacy and Reform in the Office of Governor Tom Wolf, Representative Mike Sturla, House Democratic Policy Committee Chairman, and Stephen Latanishen, Director, Office of Inter-Governmental Affairs of Pennsylvania Department of State. And so last but not least, I am the chair of the events committee. I'm just here to help. I'm here at my co-chair, Jamil Reese, who will be taking over in Q&A. And I do want to introduce our president, Kenneth L. Huston, who will have remarks in a little while. And at this point, we will have our political action committee chair, Nicole Keels-McGruder, to open us up. Nicole.
Myself. All right. Thank you very much, Shana and President Huston, Jamil, and our esteemed panelists for making this forum possible. This is very much an unprecedented time. It is indeed hard to catch our breath with this new normal, but we must stay agile and be willing and able to pivot to make sure that we get out the Black vote. We still have to be vigilant and pay attention to policy and to the people who will be charged in making policy that will affect our communities. We need officials in place who will act in our best interest. Please note that the African American community will play a decisive role in the upcoming election. Even before we were plagued with COVID-19, the voice of the African American community in the 2020 election was at risk due to disinformation campaigns and false propaganda. With the current crisis, we are now also suffering disproportionately from COVID-19 infections, deaths, and economic hardship. We must rightfully be concerned about how this combination of facts will impact our constitutional right to vote. In the last presidential election, Pennsylvania was won only by 44,000 votes. However, there were 238,000 registered African Americans that did not vote. We did not come out. We must come out this election season. So I won't spend one more iota of time on things that we already know. Because if you are on this call, you care about your family. If you're on this call, you care about your community. If you're on this call, you care about this state. So let's get to it. Let's talk about how we turn that care into action. How do we wake up the Black vote in Pennsylvania? It's easy to get on these town halls and forums and talk amongst ourselves, but we are preaching to the choir. We need everyone to talk to your friends and neighbors who are not consistent voters, who feel disenfranchised and therefore have become disengaged. We need you to develop local get out the vote groups with your friends, neighbors, and colleagues that you trust. They trust you and are more likely to move to action than with any random ad, robocall, or meme. Waking up the Black vote starts with you. So what is the plan for this upcoming primary? Step 1, request your mail-in ballot. The deadline to order your ballot is May 26th. You can apply online at votespa.com, or you can request by mail at 1-877-VOTES-PA. There's a push across the state to vote by mail. So this does put a strain on county election offices and the postal services. So we need you to order your ballot today to make sure you receive it in time. Step 2, complete your ballot and send it into your local county office. Note that the postmark date does not satisfy the deadline requirements. Your ballot must be received by your local county office by June 2nd to be counted. I repeat, the postmark date does not count. So again, mail in your ballots as soon as possible. Step 3, remind your neighbors, friends, and colleagues of these very important deadlines to help spread the word. Call, text, email a friend to make sure that they do the same. You can also host local virtual phone banks. Reach out to the state conference if you need help setting one up. So I'm going to go through the plan of action just one more time quickly. Order your ballot by May 26th. You do not need an excuse to order one. Send in your ballot so that it's received by June 2nd. And remind your sphere of influence of these important dates to help spread the word. Election officials and people studying voting in the United States say that voter fraud is extremely rare. So do not believe the hype. You can vote by mail and trust your ballot will be counted. The Commonwealth has established a means of tracking your ballot by visiting pavoterservices.pa.gov/pages/ballot tracking, and you simply enter in your name, date of birth, and select your county. Please don't worry, all this information is on the NAACP Pennsylvania State Conference website and our voter registration guide. Also, please note that the state conference has joined a coalition of organizations to help get out the vote in the prison system. One last consideration to keep in mind if you still plan on voting in person is that Senate Bill 422 has allowed for the temporary consolidation of polling locations. This was done because of the decreasing pool of election workers, many who are seniors and others who simply didn't want to put themselves at risk. This means that if you do plan to vote in person, please check your polling location before going out to vote because it may have changed. Lastly, but also just as important, we need the African American community to participate in the census. The census is still in full effect. It has not been canceled. If you have not already done so, please join your local complete count committee. Contact me if you need assistance in identifying one in your area. I charge each and every person on this call to reach out to at least 3 people via social media, text, email, or phone call, and share the mycensus2020.gov link with your entire sphere of influence. As of May 5th, the response rate for PA was 59.9%, which is just a little bit greater, which is a little greater than the national response rate, which is 57.3. You must participate in the census if your community is to get the funded that it needs. We also need to make sure that we have proper representation at the legislative level. We lost seats during the last census due to undercounts, and the undercounting occurred primarily in underrepresented communities. So stand up and be counted. In closing, the NAACP Pennsylvania State Conference will strive to be that trusted voice in the African American community within the Commonwealth. If you want to join the Pennsylvania State Conference's Wake Up the Black Vote initiative, email us at wakeUp@naacp.org to join us in our new think tank for strategizing for the upcoming election to ensure that we have a strong turnout. A part of this strategy will include recorded webinars, peer-to-peer calling campaigns, and other digital and safe decentralized approaches to organizing. Please follow us on Facebook at NAACP PAC. If you want some ideas or join forces with others within the state, please visit the state's conference's political action page, and we will be highlighting activities and best practices from around the state. This is arguably one of the most important elections of our lifetime. We need you to join us in waking up the Black vote in 2020. This is our future and our fight. Thank you. And that completes my opening remarks, Shana. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nicole. I apologize for that. It just took me a couple of minutes, a couple of seconds to click my unmute button. Okay, we will next have remarks from the NAACP Pennsylvania State Conference President, Kenneth L. Huston.
Good evening. I want to, first of all, thank each and every one of you for attending this virtual town hall. I will be extremely brief in my remarks. I think Ms. McGruder pretty much covered it all. I want to thank you all for taking the time in your busy schedules, I'm sure. And those of you who are state elected leaders, we appreciate your attendance tonight. I know there are a lot of questions that folks across the Commonwealth have for each and every one of you. So with that, I bid you a welcome. We hope that you will not be a stranger. We intend to move forward with more of these meetings. And on behalf of the Pennsylvania State NAACP, we welcome you and thank you all very much. I look forward to meeting with you all in the future. But thank you all very, very much.
All right, thank you so much, President Huston. Okay, it looks like the Honorable Dwight Evans has joined us. He is the Congressman representative for the 3rd District, and we will have some words from him. I'm going to unmute you.
You have me.
Congressman.
I think the mute is on your side. I think I'm clear. You have it?
We can hear you.
You can hear me now?
Yes, sir.
You got me now. I know it's on my side. Believe me, as much as this has been open today, I want to thank you, the NAACP, what you do for this state, what you do for this nation, and the historical aspect that you affect all of us. As you know, the effect that you've had, particularly in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, there's 18 congresspeople. I'm the only African-American congressman in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. There's been 5. I'm the 5th one. The first one was Robert N.C. Nix, 1958. He was chairman of the Post Office Committee, significant, because that was significant in all our lives. And it's interesting that we're debating the Post Office Service. And then there was Congressman Gray, who was the budget chairman, and he was the whip. He was one of 4 whips in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And he was the first African-American. So I am the first one to serve on the Ways and Means Committee, the oldest committee in the history of the nation. And I'm vice chair of the Small Business Committee. So 2 significant committees contributing to national policy. That doesn't happen unless the NAACP, the kind of activism that you have demonstrated over the years and you have gone against the tide. So I want to say that. Secondly, we are in probably, I heard all the comments earlier, and I applaud you talking about the importance of the census, vote by mail, all of those things. And I see Senator Art Haywood and my colleague, Representative Mike Sturla. I know Mike Sturla from Lancaster for an awful long time. So it goes back. You couldn't have two better good public service as Senator Haywood and Senator State Representative Mike Sturla. So where are we today? Right now, we are, unless you was around 100 years ago, I don't think anybody on this conversation was a part of a pandemic. 1955, 1915, 1918. And here we are. None of us have ever been through this. None of us ever managed this. But what I do know and believe, we will only get through this unless we work together, all aspects of it. That's not to say we always have to agree, but we have to work to get through this, because first and foremost, it is about safety. It is about safety. You cannot grow an economy without safety. Safety and economics are both go hand in hand. So don't let anybody tell you that one is pitted against the other. It's not. You need both. That's why I talk about universal testing. Los Angeles, 10 million people have all kinds of options available in terms of testing. I believe there needs to be a public health approach in terms of approaching this issue. So testing, tracing, and treatment. Testing, tracing, and treatment. It is that combination. And particularly within the African-American community, and I've written a letter to Governor Wolf and Mayor Kenneth, and I outlined to them, because there was a vote for $25 billion across the United States, $11 billion to the state. Now, I believe that there needs to be a strategic strategy in how you do testing, because if you don't deal with the issue of testing and tracing, you will always have a second doubt in people's minds about them getting back involved in this economy. It's not something you can take lightly, but the fact of the matter, you have to think about it. So what have we done? We have passed in Washington over the last 3 months, or month, 2 months, what we call the CARES Act. We did money for transportation. We did money for education. We did rebates back to individuals. We did unemployment and small business, you name it, we have. We are now discussing CARES Act 4. And what we plan on doing is looking at how we deal with local governments and state governments. We're looking at doing more small business. We're looking at student debt. We're looking at all these things. And I want you to understand something. The Federal Reserve backs up every decision that's being made. That's the key element you want to recognize. The Federal Reserve, the General Assembly. So that means fiscal policy and monetary policy are extremely important. But again, all these issues we have today, I share with you, all members of delegation, there's 18 of us, Democrat and Republican, have all been together. So we all understand the importance of it. The senator, both the Democratic and the Republican Senator Case and Senator Toomey, they all understand. Now we're coming up to this key, and there's probably going to be some difference of opinion, and that's why it's important. I'm glad you are having this town meeting at this particular time for us to have discussion about where you go. So what I'm going to be interested in, I'm going to hang around, is your comments, your feedback, the things that I need to understand in this entire process. I've done some things with Senator Art Haywood in terms of the number of town meetings he has had and listened to his constituents. I think that's very important. But I think it's important by what you're doing here today. The last thing I want to say to you, under the leadership of Karen Bass out of California, she's doing a fantastic job. She used to be the Speaker of the House. She's a student of Willie Brown. And she's been around, she does a great job leading 55 members 55 members of the Congressional Black Caucus. So that's an awful lot of members. When Robert N.C. Nix started, it was like between 17 or something. We got 55 of them now. And got some real talented people. And you have Jim Clyburn, who's the whip, South Carolina, who is the one that Speaker Pelosi appointed to have oversight over the distribution of money. Barbara Lee, who's on the policy committee, as well as she's on the appropriation committee. She's from California. And Hakeem Jeffries, who's from New York, who is on, who is our caucus chair. Those three African Americans are the ones in leadership, and they're very much there. You got a number of African Americans who are in the forefront in terms of chairmanship. So Maxine Waters, financial advisor, from Representative Johnson, who's science. You have some other ones. I don't have anybody's name on the top of my head, but they all are part of Benny Thompson, Homeland Security. Benny Thompson, Homeland Security. That's extreme. Nothing moves, you can imagine, if you're not dealing with Homeland Security. So that's extremely important. I mentioned Maxine, I mentioned Benny Thompson, as I mentioned Representative Johnson. She's very excellent, and that's important. And I'll come up with the last two names, forgive me. Then you got John Lewis, who's like the conscience of the entire caucus, who's on the Ways and Means Committee with me, who is the senior member on the Ways and Means Committee, John Lewis, who has a huge influence on everybody. And when he speaks, everybody listens to hear. Then we got some relatively new members who are all good talent. So you got some great talent. This is great. Then you got Bobby Scott, who is someone who deals with education and labor, workforce. Bobby Scott is someone education and labor. That's who you have him on there. So as I just mentioned to you, you have some real fighters, and we did an event with NAACP. And then you had Mr. Cummings, who passed away out of Baltimore, who was a chairman of a committee, chairman of that he's no longer in there. You have Kwesi Mfume, who just got elected out of Baltimore, who've been around for 10 years, and now he's coming back. So those are the people who are the influence people, and like I said, 55 people. Again, I thank you for this opportunity, and I sit back and let Senator Haywood and my good friend Mike Sturla. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Honorable Dwight Evans, Congressman, Representative of Pennsylvania 3rd District. Thank you for being with us. And we understand that you had another meeting and you left out of that one just to be here with us tonight. So thank you for blessing us with your time. The resources, the names that he listed, just know that the meeting is being recorded, so it will be available later if you weren't able to copy down all of those names. So thank you again for blessing us with that wealth of information. So next we do have Senator Art Haywood, Pennsylvania State Senator for the 4th District.
Thank you so much. I'm glad to be on this town hall. Really want to thank my friend, Congressman Dwight Evans. He's provided a tremendous amount of leadership in my district and beyond, and a tremendous amount of guidance to me as well, as I'm relatively new in the legislature. So let me just start with some background. We all know that African Americans have been disproportionately affected by the pandemic, and that many of the essential workers who are doing the food service work, the custodian work, the grocery work, the restaurant work, many of them are Black and brown. Just want to highlight to make sure everyone understands that restaurant workers are often making $2.83 an hour. $2.83 an hour is what restaurant workers can make. They're supposed to get the rest in tips. They're not getting that at this time. So we got some significant challenges in getting personal protective equipment to some of these essential workers, to many of them. And you may not know that right now, we got about 1.7 million people who are getting unemployment compensation. Back in the Great Recession, when Barack Obama had to save the nation, it was about 800,000. So we got more than double the unemployment today than we had at that time. We're getting close to Great Depression levels if we cannot figure out how to stop the pandemic. A number of small business loan programs and business loan programs, a lot of that money got eaten up by the big companies. And so a number of small and African minority-owned businesses did not fully participate in some of the loan programs. And so that's where we need some remedies, some further support. Now here in the state Senate, we're in the minority. We got the state House, we got the state Senate, and then we got the governor. Republicans control pretty much the House and the Senate, and then we got the governor. So the governor most of the time is outnumbered 2-to-1. So we got to do as much as we can to support his agenda and work with him. What I'm calling for in this recovery is what I'm calling a just recovery. And a just recovery is a recovery that includes the Black, it includes the brown, it includes those who have been left out. A just recovery means that we got to make sure that African Americans get a share of the recovery. And in the state Senate, we have come up with a plan for about $300 million that can help Black and brown and those who've been traditionally left out to get a share of the recovery. We got about $125 million that we're setting aside for small business loans. We got about 10 million and grants. We got about $10 million we're setting aside for historically Black colleges. We know that without a specific inclusion of Blacks and browns, that we are going to be left out. Now, I did want to share some things on what can be done next. I really like the plan that Nicole laid out because there's a lot at stake in November. What's at stake in November is whether there's going to be health care coverage for everyone or it's going to be eliminated under what we got under the current president. What's at stake in November is whether or not we're going to have a continuing drive for hate and violence, which we currently have on the current president's agenda. We got the most racist president probably since Andrew Johnson, who took over right after President Lincoln was killed. So there's a lot at stake for the African American community. Voting by mail is a key way that we can get it done. But I want to tell you about my district. We looked at those who had applied for vote by mail application ward by ward. In Chestnut Hill, which is a predominantly high income white area, 25% of folks have applied for vote by mail. It's an award called 59, which is part of Germantown, 4%. Logan, 7%. Some of these areas, 8% of the people in those areas have applied for vote by mail. I can tell you that if we don't get much higher vote by mail participation by people who live in the areas of Germantown, West Oak Lane, Logan, the current president's going to be in again. It's not complicated. We don't have to turn out, we lose. So getting the vote by mail is going to be critical because Dr. Fauci and others have said that it's a good chance there's going to be a return of the virus in the fall. So we got from now until October to get our people to vote by mail and sign up. And the steps that Nicole outlined are exactly what needs to be done. I do also want to share this. There are some significant initiatives going on in the African American community. Congressman Evans and I have been working with a group of African American doctors who are out there trying to test as many people as they can to make sure that we address the fact that African Americans have been left out. That's been an initiative of Black doctors that Congressman Evans and I have been trying to support. But this is a long-term battle. I know we all celebrate the 1964 Civil Rights Act. You may not know that before that, there was an 1866 Civil Rights Act, 1866. And before that, there was a 1957 Civil Rights Act. I share this to highlight that the struggle for freedom is protracted. The struggle for freedom takes a long time. And the first person to fight is just as good as the last person. So we've got some critical months here between May June, July, August, September, October. That's the months we have to apply ourselves to get our folks to vote by mail. So if the virus comes back in November, we can still win. We're glad to take any questions. Thank you so much for giving me an opportunity to share these comments with all who are listening.
Thank you so much for all of your work and what you contribute to our community and just overall the greater world. Senator Haywood, thank you for your remarks. We are moving on now to Norman Bristol Colon, Executive Director, Governor, Census 2020, Complete Count Commission, PA Department of Community and Economic Development. Norman.
Thank you, Shana, and thank you to all the other panelists. I think that if we're going to move the African-American agenda forward, not only in Pennsylvania, but all across the nation, we have to make sure that we follow the civic engagement and the civic duty that are enshrined in our Constitution and that are enshrined in our laws. And that is making sure that we have high number of African-Americans turning out to vote, but also making sure that we finally, for the first time in our nation history, we stop the undercount of African Americans in the US Census. You know that the Republic was founded as a government of the people, for the people, and by the people, so everything is connected by the census. And if you and we only have, the only African American congressman that we have in Pennsylvania is Congressman Evans. So he's the congressman of all of us. 1.3, 1.4 million African Americans in Pennsylvania, 1 million Latinos in Pennsylvania. So he's a congressman representing the voice in the United States Congress, possibly the most powerful chamber in the world. He is representing the voices of brown and black of about 2.5 million people. Now you tell me, how many members of Congress represent 2.5 million people? Very few of them. So that's why the counting everyone on the census is so important for the African-American community of the Commonwealth and the African-American community of the nation. You know, it is all about the congressional representation that we have in Congress, but also after we have a complete and accurate count, you all know, and Mike, Representative Sturla, and the Senator, you all know that we're going to get into a big fight. And that fight is going to be redistricting, and how we are going to have, for sure, a government of the people, for the people, and by the people in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. The only way that we are going to be able to accomplish that is to make sure that we have a complete and accurate count in the African American and Latino community of Pennsylvania. For many reasons, because those are the two communities, and the Asian American community, those are the communities that are growing in Pennsylvania. Those are the communities that have been neglected. Those are the communities that have been undercounted. And when you look at the investment, even under this pandemic, the investments that the United States Congress and the White House are investing in states and territories all across the nation is based on the numbers provided by the census data. So if we were not counted 10 years ago, our numbers are not there. And we have to stop, you know, the circle of poverty and the lack of investment from federal funding to our communities. And the only way that we are going to be able to do so is by making sure that we have a complete and accurate count. 10 years is a long time. If we miss African Americans, the count of African Americans in Pennsylvania, we will have to wait until 2030 to really make sure that we have, you know, those individuals counted. But in the process, a kid that was born, you know, in 2020, in 2030, that kid is going to be 10 years old. The lack of funding, the lack of resources for hospitals, for parks and recreation, for schools, for student loans, all that is going to be impacting the well-being of the African-American community and the promise of that American dream to that young African-American in Pennsylvania. And that's why the census is so important. It is so important because it's connected to everything that we do in our nation. If we want to change the dynamics, you all know how hard it has been for the governor to really govern in Pennsylvania. Why? Because we don't have the political representations needed to make sure that we have a balanced legislature that will, in fact, help the governor pass the legislation that we need to make sure that brown and black progress in the Commonwealth. In addition to that, the census is all connected to investment in jobs and services. Mike has been a champion in Lancaster, in the southeast of Lancaster, the poorest neighborhood in Lancaster County, when it comes to workforce investment through Tech Centro. But the only way that we will be able to increase those funding and those investments for workforce development, for the jobs of the future, to get brown and black ready so they can compete for the jobs of the future, is by making sure that we have a complete and accurate count. And also the congressman talked about, the difficulty that we are having from the United States government and the fact that they have a committed agenda to dismantle and destroy Obamacare. Well, the US Census really guarantee how much money we get for healthcare and health insurance and Medicaid, Medicare, insurance for individuals with disabilities, supplemental nutrition assistance programs for low-income people in our states, Medicare Part B, Pell Grants for college tuition, housing assistance. This is another thing that I know that the Senator and Mike and many of us and Dan, we have been looking after Hurricane Maria devastated Puerto Rico. We all know that some of the biggest challenges that we have been facing in Lancaster and in Philadelphia and Arlington, all across the nation, has been affordable housing. And the only way that we can really get federal funding and federal support for affordable housing in Pennsylvania is by having a complete and accurate count. We are talking about $800 billion a year. $800 billion of dollars a year is an investment of more than $27 billion a year for Pennsylvania. About $2,100 per person. If we do a complete and accurate count, that is an investment for the next 10 years of over $270 billion from the federal government coming back to the states that help to balance state budgets, that help to provide assistance to the most vulnerable. But in addition to that, there is a return in our investments. This is not money that belongs to the White House. This is money that Pennsylvania taxpayers are already contributing. And the only thing that we are asking, bring some of that money back. And the only way to do so is by having a complete and accurate count in the Commonwealth. So for all those that are listening through this webinar, if there's something that we can do as brown and black people in the Commonwealth and across the nation, if we are in the business of making sure that the true American dream is available to everyone in the next 10 years, in the next 20 years, in the next 30 years, let's make sure that we go back to the call that Nicole made us at the beginning of her remarks. And it was all about civic engagement. And the passport for the hopes, dreams, and aspirations of brown and black in Pennsylvania is through civic engagement and making sure that we have a high voting turnout, but that we also have the most accurate count in census so we can have the political representation that we need, that we deserve for the next 10 years.
Thank you so much, Norman, for sharing your information and resources on the census and why the census count is so important. Thank you so much. Next, we have Dan Jurman, Executive Director of Advocacy and Reform of the Office of Governor Tom Wolf.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much, Shana. Thank you all for being with us tonight. The Office of Advocacy and Reform was created by Governor Wolf back in July as an office to focus on better protecting and serving vulnerable Pennsylvanians. That's a big population. We're talking about people living below the poverty line, youth who are in detention centers and congregate care settings, people with intellectual and physical disabilities, seniors. It's a big group, and for me represents the people I've served my whole career. Before I took this job, I worked at the Community Action Partnership of Lancaster County and had spent most of my career doing anti-poverty work. And so I am pleased to be in a position to try and make life better for all vulnerable people across Pennsylvania. As was already said, the situation that we're in is unprecedented. As I've talked to people, I've said it's as if we have the pandemic of 1918 on top of what's getting very close to a Great Depression, on top of the supply shortages from right before World War II, as we first entered that conflict and didn't have what we needed for the fight that was happening on the front lines. And I would say a crisis of leadership to handle any one of those three crises at the national level, let alone all three of them at the same time. And of course, they're all exacerbating each other and making each other worse. And so, of course, in times like this, with this kind of crisis, the people that my office was created to serve are the people who were already vulnerable before this happened, and now they become the casualties on the front line of this fight. And we've got to do everything we can to protect them and to make sure that that doesn't happen. And we've already seen it happening too quickly. And as this has happened, we've seen all the flaws in the system. We've seen all the things that didn't work, all the things that were already wrong with our systems. And so there are some things that I've been working on in the office right away. From the beginning of this crisis, some of the things that I've been advocating for started off with, as Norman said, housing has been a big part of the crisis that we've seen, certainly in Lancaster County, and I know it exists across the nation. But a freeze on foreclosures and evictions was one of the first things I advocated for, and was thankful to have many allies in that fight, including the governor's announcement today of making that go farther. But not just that, I know very, very well that someone who has their eviction frozen, it's still going to come due at some point. And so we've also been advocating for a freeze or a moratorium on mortgages and rents, period, for anyone who's been affected by this. And we have to do that at the federal level, but we're trying to push as much as we can to make sure that people don't have 3 months of rent due on July 1st or some other month when everything reopens. People won't be able to bear that. There's no way, especially if they've been out of work because of this crisis. We've looked at advocating for the release of anyone who's imprisoned who is there for a nonviolent offense, especially anyone who is there because they just couldn't pay their bail or they couldn't pay some kind of fees. And we wanted to get people released from prison as quickly as possible. I've also been doing some advocacy work around the ICE detention facility in Berks County and talking to advocates and others about the safety of people there. I had a chance to visit that facility shortly before the stay-at-home order went into effect, and was grateful that I had gotten that in before I wasn't able to get inside that facility. We've been advocating for test sites in communities of color and in communities that are below the poverty line, and also, some of the sort of tone deaf regulations around some of the sites that have existed. The talk of people showing up at testing sites and being told it's a drive-up site, you can't walk up. Well, that doesn't help people in urban settings who don't own cars. So how do we make sure that we're when we're setting up test sites in vulnerable communities, that we're doing it in a way that meets them where they are and fits the resources that they have, or augments and builds equity around the resources that they don't have. In terms of thinking about long-term, because we have a lot of work to do. If there's one thing that this pandemic has done, it is stoked that fire inside of me that's led to a whole career of anti-poverty work around all the things that are wrong with our system. We have to fight for better health care for people. We have to work as hard as we can to make sure that people's health care is not connected to their jobs. And the number of people who not only lost their jobs, but now have to be terrified that if they get COVID-19, not only might they die, but they might bankrupt their entire family. They might lose everything because of the medical bills. We need to work to build a living wage, a living minimum wage for the people that are working. I go every week and do the shopping for my family, and see clerks there risking their lives and their health who I know are not making enough money to support their families. We have to fight for that. We've got to make sure that we get it. If we can call people essential during this crisis and we can't pay them enough to survive afterwards, then shame on us as a nation. We're the richest country in the world. We should be able to take better care of our people. And that's a fight that requires all of us. That's a fight that requires us to make sure that our voices are heard at the polls, and to make sure that we're doing all the things that Nicole and Norman have talked about. When this is over, we have a lot of work to do on housing. When we talk about some of the comorbidities that make this a more deadly disease for people who are living below the poverty line and for people of color, sometimes that's housing with mold in it that's giving people asthma, that's making them especially vulnerable to diseases like this. And so we've got to make sure that substandard housing is not acceptable in any of our communities, and that we're doing the work that we need to do to make sure that people have decent, safe housing. We also know in Lancaster County, where I'm sitting right now, the lead poisoning rate is almost 4 times as high as it is in Flint, Michigan. It's from paint. And we know that lead paint is robbing our children in communities of color and in communities below the poverty line, robbing our children of their potential before they even get a chance, which then relegates them to a life where they're not going to have the opportunities that kids that don't have their own housing poisoning them have. We have to fight these fights. Finally, one of the things that we're working on for this is to not have vulnerable populations and people of color's concerns dictated by people who aren't living in those communities. And so right now, my office has proposed building networks around the state. I especially want to be able to do that in person at some point, but whatever we need to do in the meantime, in meetings like this and others, to give people an opportunity to tell us directly what their concerns are. And to also identify leaders within that group to guide policy and to guide the advocacy that my office does and to guide what's happening coming out of the governor's office. What I proposed at this point, and I know we have a serious state budget crisis looming, but what I propose at this point is that we pay people to do that. We pay consultants to tell us things all the time from very high-priced consulting firms. I think if we're going to ask citizens, especially citizens who are vulnerable, to give us their voice, then their time is valuable and they're giving up something else to do that, and we should pay them to do that. And so we've proposed compensating people to serve in this way. So those are some of the things that we're working on. But again, I see people dying unnecessarily. I had someone reach out to me when this all started and said, you know, this is urgent. People of color are dying disproportionately of this disease. And my response was, this was urgent decades ago. This was urgent decades ago. We've allowed this to happen as a nation. And it's clear where our sins are when something like this happens. And so now we're going to have to work our rear ends off to make sure that this never happens again. Thank you all for letting me be a part of this tonight.
Thank you so much, Dan Jurman, Executive Director of Advocacy and Reform in the Office of Governor Tom Wolf, for sharing more about the advocacy and reform programs that you all are working on. And hopefully folks will be able to participate or partner and collaborate with you in the near future. Next, we have Representative Mike Sturla, House Democratic Policy Committee Chairman. Mike.
Thanks. You know, the luxury of going after other people have spoken is that I get to edit all my comments. The one thing that I want to say is that part of what I've been doing as policy chair, and part of what I think we need to be doing, is there are those of us that have been looking at the inequities that have surrounded us for years, and we're working on that. There's a part of me that looks at this pandemic as an opportunity, because I think there are now more people that understand some of those inequities. As Dan pointed out, when you go to the grocery store and there's somebody who basically is putting their life on the line to sell groceries to you, who probably doesn't have health insurance, who's probably making a minimum wage, There has not yet been talk about, gee, if these are really essential workers, they should all get a raise. They should all be the ones that have the health care. They should all be the ones that have the benefits. They should all be the ones. But I think there's a better understanding among the general public. I think that we probably have a year or two to sort of inculcate that in all members of society and get them to really sort of rally around that, because I don't see this pandemic going away or the economic crisis going away for a couple of years. Until we have a vaccine, you can open all the businesses you want, but I'm not going to go sit shoulder to shoulder with somebody in a bar or a restaurant without a mask on and just hope that things are going to be good. So businesses are going to be down. Our economy is going to be down. Our revenues are going to be down. Then I think, and this gets to the point of who we have in leadership and what the census says and who we vote for in this coming election, makes all the difference in the world. Because if I look back just at the recession, which now looks like an easy thing to have dealt with back in 2010, the Republican response to that was to cut $1 billion from education. And that didn't help the inequities, it made them worse. And while we got through a budget without raising taxes, and all it did was make the situation worse. And we were just about recovered 10 years later from those cuts. And here we go again. We have an opportunity, not in this year's budget so much, but in next year's budget, when I believe we are still going to be, billions of dollars in the hole, to say there's a different way to do this. It doesn't have to be death by 1,000 cuts. It doesn't have to be drastic cuts to things like education or human services, like we saw in 2010. We can say, unlike the federal government, which can print some money, but we can say we can either borrow some money or we can raise some taxes with the idea that we're going to dig ourselves out of this hole over a 10-year period. But we're not going to completely decimate our essential workers, our housing, our health care, our education system in the process. And in fact, in doing so, we can actually make some of the changes that we wanted to in terms of better education equity. If we're going to fund education, then let's fund it in an equitable way instead of making it worse. If we're going to fund healthcare, let's fund it in an equitable way. If we're going to tax, let's tax those that, made it through this, COVID-19 crisis and never saw a penny lost. And instead say, let's cut some breaks to some people that were hurt rather hard in this. The one ironic thing that I see happening is the essential workers, which were working minimum wage jobs, which were by and large numbers of people of color, did not get a raise, and they see some of their non-essential community members who are now on unemployment walking around telling people how they're making more on unemployment than they were when they were working. And when they were working, they were making more than the person who is the essential worker. And, again, the inequity is moving the wrong way instead of toward where we need to be going. Having said all that, the last election cycle, we put Jordan Harrison as our whip, who's an African-American from Philadelphia, Joanna McClinton, an African-American woman from Philadelphia. We had Rosita Youngblood. There's Vince Hughes over in the Senate. If we can get control of the House and the Senate and work with Governor Wolf, we have an opportunity to reverse some of those inequities. And I know everybody always says, well, yes, every election is important. If we don't reverse those inequities, and if the governor is held in the stranglehold to try and make cuts to cut our way out of this for the next 3 years remaining in his term, I think we will be paying for this for a generation. And so for me, the importance of this is paramount if we ever intend to do anything about the inequities that face us now and had faced us, but we kept, inching our way toward doing something about it. But the Republicans, I hate to be partisan about this, but the Republicans have used this opportunity to say, let's freeze property taxes so that education gets underfunded. Let's eliminate environmental regulations because it doesn't matter if people die because people are polluting. They've gone the exact opposite direction of saying, here's an opportunity to correct the things we needed to correct. They've said, let's just make it worse. And if we can't do something about it in this election, I think we might be lost for a generation. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Representative Mike Sturla, House Democratic Policy Committee Chairman, and from my hometown of Lancaster, so I'm a little biased, but thank you very much for sharing some of what you all are participating in and how important the vote is. And now we have Stephen Latanishen, Office of Inter-Governmental Affairs of Pennsylvania Department of State. Stephen.
Hey, thank you so much, Shana. And also thanks for giving me the totally unenviable task of following these titans before me. Representative Sturla, full disclosure, you probably don't remember this, but 10 years ago, I was an intern in your Lancaster district office. And so it's a genuine pleasure to be here on the line with you as a panelist, and an honor to be on with the rest of you gentlemen as well. So what I'm here to discuss is voting. First and foremost, Nicole, you did a really great job of providing a general overview how folks can get resources and get into the process. But I've spent the last 3 years in the governor's office proper, and then about the last 11 months, I moved over into this new role here at the Department of State, specifically to work on expanding access to the vote. Thanks to the cooperation and input of Senator Haywood, Representative Sturla, and a number of others in the General Assembly, whom I know are hamstrung by their, the leadership of their respective chambers. We were able to accomplish the greatest expansion in terms of voting accessibility and reforms in Pennsylvania's election code in 80 years. It's really hard to overstate the importance of what we were able to do by enacting Act 77 last October, and then Act 12 just a couple of months ago. Through that, we were able to create a no-excuse mail-in ballot process, the likes of which Pennsylvania has been yearning for several generations, and just hadn't been able to get yet. So with that, we've put into place what's called the Ready to Vote Pennsylvania Voter Education Plan. And that's in order to ensure that the governor's mandate, which is to expand voting access to as many Pennsylvanians as possible, can be carried through. That was significantly complicated by the pandemic, but we kind of did a little bit of quick thinking. We've sent out 4.7 million postcards to each and every registered primary voter in the Commonwealth, informing them of their rights and the changes to election law. You folks should have been receiving them and will continue to receive them through the next couple of weeks. We're also doing TV ads, radio ads, and digital advertising on Instagram, Twitter, Reddit, and Facebook, of course, so that Pennsylvanians are aware of their rights. And specifically for the constituents here, mail-in voting is really the best option to take. It's easy. It is super quick to apply for online. and you will get emails every step of the way giving you a peace of mind in knowing where your ballot application is and then where your ballot is. So when you apply through the website that Nicole mentioned earlier, you'll get an email saying, hey, the county has received your application, they're processing it. You'll get another email when they have sent out your actual ballot. And then when you fill out that ballot and send it back on in, you'll get another email when it has been received and processed and counted by the county. Now, I've seen several good questions here along the way. One of them I actually did answer so far, but I just want to put it out a little bit more widely. If you receive a mail-in ballot and for whatever reason, maybe you don't have time or you forget or you just can't get stamps together to get it in, you can take that mail-in ballot or absentee ballot directly to your county elections office and submit it in person. Now, for legal reasons, we can't call that early voting, but for all practical purposes, you can vote early, and we'd encourage you to do it. Even if you don't apply online, if you take a trip down to your county election office, you can request that ballot in person. They'll hand it to you. You can fill it out and you can give it right on back to them. And then your vote is done. It is counted. It is over. You have made your voice heard. Obviously, in our COVID-19 reality, folks need to not be moving around as much. Take advantage of the mail-in process. One thing that I would throw out there, if you, for whatever reason, can't fill out that ballot in time, please do not bring that mail-in ballot to your polling place. They will not accept it at your polling place. You can vote, but you will need to vote provisionally. And what happens with that is, at the end of the day, the county will tally basically that they did send you a mail-in ballot, they didn't receive it, but they did get a provisional, and that's when they count your provisional vote in that in that specific scenario. For the general election, however, you can bring your mail-in ballot to the polling place. They will shred it for you in person and then allow you to vote traditionally. But we're not quite there yet for the primary. Last thing I want to go over, because I know we're short on time here. We knew that 2020 was going to be a high misinformation year from the start. And that's why we've been doing our very, very best to put together a comprehensive set of easily shareable graphics, sample letters to the editor, basically a whole advocacy campaign in one easy box, and that is our Ready to Vote digital toolkit, and I put that link out in the chat. That allows stakeholders such as the NAACP and others to ensure that folks are getting credible, reliable information. I would also strongly caution folks that are on the line, unless you see information coming directly from the Pennsylvania Department of State or one of our sister agencies, please take it with a grain of salt. Now, for the voter guide that the NAACP put out, it's fantastic. I've taken a look at it. Thank you so much. The resources you put together are extraordinary, and they really echo what we're doing. So just please, unless you see the state seal on it or the NAACP seal on it there, please take it with a grain of salt and go to Votes PA if you have any questions. We have folks standing by to answer your questions. You can email or call us, or feel free to bug me personally. I'm happy to answer any questions. I'm also happy to come out, speak to any additional groups. That's my job. That's why the governor asked me to come over and do this. And so far, we've really been having some great success, in large part thanks to the efforts of Senator Haywood, Representative Sturla, and their colleagues in the General Assembly. So thank you so much for being willing to have me on. And again, happy to take any questions.
Thanks again, Steve, for sharing details about voting and the voting process. We will now move into our question and answer portion. As you mentioned, Stephen, our time is limited and we want to honor everyone's time. So we'll try to get through as many of the questions or comments as possible. And for those that go unanswered, we will try to respond to them and post them on our social media sites. So I am going to turn this segment over to my co-chair, Jamil Reese.
Thank you, Shana. All right, just give me 1 second. I just want to pull up any new questions that have come through. We do have a couple that's here. Our first question we're going to say is, what is the measures that we have right now for law enforcement, for people pursuing of color wearing masks, for discouraging attacks on civil people of color? What is some of the things that's being done basically out there right now? This can be by our congressman or our senator.
He's on mute.
1 second. All right.
You Ray, can you hear me now?
Yes.
I think you raised a very good question, and that needs to be an issue followed up. As you know, there was a story about a young man getting shot and killed in Georgia. And obviously that's something we need to pay attention to. On the House Judiciary Committee, there's a number of people from Congresswoman Bass, he's on the Judiciary, Congressman Akeem, Cedric Richmond. So I would suggest that we jointly, and I'll be willing to do it with you, NAACP, that we raise questions and hold this Department of Justice accountable for being on top of that. So, you know, I'm willing to be fully a part of that. And you raise a very good question, because with the pandemic and people wearing masks, particularly African Americans, not just African Americans, I think it's something we need to be vigilant about. Haywood.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And I would also be glad to be engaged here in Pennsylvania. And one of the things that we did after Antoine Rose was shot and killed outside of Pittsburgh was to create some legislation so that officers would get some more training, so they'd be less likely to have the bias against African-American men. And that bias causes them to overreact and shoot and kill African-American men. We thought some training would help them deal with that. So we got to continue to push that. In Pennsylvania, there's a police chiefs association. I think that we can reach out together with the NAACP to the state of Pennsylvania's police chief association, as well as with the state troopers, and try to help them understand the importance of not cutting down the profiling, maybe getting some more training for them. I tell you where else we could get some assistance that I think would be helpful from the NAACP. We've got some proposals in to reduce the use of lethal force, so that when police get in an encounter, there's less likely to shoot and kill someone. There are rules that the police have to follow about when they can exercise lethal force, and they need to be revised so that folks are less likely to be killed. I and others have proposed letters and some other options to save lives. Be glad, very glad to join with the NAACP in these efforts. Just want to go back to what I said earlier. It will take protracted action to change police practices. This is not like sending out 30 tweets or something like that, or having one protest or 4 protests. It's going to take consistent, concerted action to get it done. And if the NAACP is committed to that, which I believe you will be, I think we can make some progress.
Thank you both for answering those questions for us. My next question will be, is there a push for automatic sending everyone a ballot for the general election?
Yes, there has been a demand for that. It doesn't look like our current system is able to get that done, obviously, by the primary, June the 2nd. But we are pushing for that in November. Would require possibly some changes in legislation. But I, for one, am a big advocate for everybody voting for mail. All those who are listening should know I already voted by mail. I got the application, which it took me 7 minutes to do online. Earlier in the week, I got the ballot and I filled it out at my kitchen table and sent it in. So I've already voted, and many others can do the same.
Thank you. Another question I
Oh,
have.
Congressman Evans, I think Congressman Evans has a comment.
We are trying to push that as a part of our Cares for, to trying to push all mail ballots throughout the entire nation. Since it is a federal election, that's on our agenda right there. That's on our agenda. Since it's a federal election, that's on our agenda to try to see if we can make that happen.
And Congressman, I can tell you that Senator Casey's office has reached out to me and Secretary Bookvar asking about the same thing. So you're in very good company there too.
Yes. So we're trying to. That would be a huge issue to do, and that's a way for us to support our postal service and to help our postal service. As you know, this president is against our postal service. And we're standing up. So the postal service and the mailing, which are one thing I would like to say to Steve, I'm glad you said what you said about the standards, because I think it was my chief of staff that said today on the social media and misinformation, you're correct that there are some people, and I don't know if that's specifically in the African-American community, are nervous about the vote by mail because what is happening on the internet. So I don't know, have you heard that, Steve?
Yes, we have. And that's in part why we're trying to ensure that we can combat a lot of this misinformation. Vote by mail is safe. It is secure. But if you have any questions whatsoever, relay them back to the state. That's what we're here for. We'll answer those questions, and we're working to ensure that we can get that proper fact checking, proper information out specifically in the African American community, because we know that I mean, turnout among the African American community, we need to do more to ensure that every African American feels comfortable exercising their God-given right to vote. And one more plug here, if you have any questions, you can always take that ballot and walk right down to the elections office and cast it in person early, anytime up to 8 p.m. on election day.
Thank you guys for answering that question for me. All right, I have another question coming in. Is there any information on hosting a testing site in our own community?
Who's that question to?
Is there anybody on the panel that can answer that first?
So it sounds like they want to do testing. Core to getting testing done is having an organization that can conduct the testing. In Philadelphia, a group of African-American doctors pulled themselves together to do the testing, but they're already physicians. They have access to testing supplies. So I think if individuals want to try to do testing, they need to really be associated with an organization that has the capacity to do so. Second thing I would say is that if you're in a county where there's not enough testing, I strongly encourage you to contact the county commissioners who are part of local government to encourage them to put some testing into the community. Local government probably got a better shot at having an organization to get the testing done than just a group of folks in the neighborhood. I do have one other thing I'd like to shoot out when I got my opportunity here. For the NAACP and all the callers, like this is off topic in a way, but in 2040, by 2040, there's a prediction that African Americans and Latinos will be a majority of the nation. We're gonna have a majority of the nation that's non-white in the next 25 years. We gotta get ready for that now.
On the testing, I've been advocating universal testing. You know, there was something called the seat belt. We made sure everybody had to wear a seat belt. That was public health. So it's clear to me that we have to keep hammering car insurance, things of that nature. We got to keep hammering over and over again, because we cannot accept the fact that, there's people. So it's testing, tracing, and treating. It has to be our message. And the NAACP, and particularly with some of the things I heard about the issue around you can talk about income inequality, you can talk about health disparities, you can go through that. And the only way you can address it, and the reason I ultimately believe is going to be, and this is just my theory, look, James can't play basketball until they have testing. I'm not talking about for the players, I'm talking about for the spectators. Football can't do what it does, all them sports. So it's not an accident that they are not talking about having fans in the stadium. The reality of it is they accept the fact that, and the ideal situation is for testing to take place. The University of Arizona, 45,000 students, 45,000 students, 8,000 employees. The president of that university came out yesterday and said that's what he's going to do. So I'm telling you, it may be drip, 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 but we have to NAACP, we got to collectively make that, because I'm telling you, from a societal standpoint, if you don't push for the universal testing at the end of the day, I don't know how you're going to get those doors back open.
Thank you. Just for the sake of time, that was our last question at this time. I'm going to turn it back over to my chair, Shana.
Thank you all so much. We received a laundry list of questions for you all. As I mentioned, we will be sending them to you so that you can all comment, and then we'll post them later on. So at this time, we would like to have closing remarks from President Kenneth Huston of the NAACP Pennsylvania State Conference.
Thank you, Shana. First of all, I want to thank each and every one of you for coming tonight and joining us in this virtual town hall. As you know, the NAACP is the oldest civil rights organization throughout these United States. I think that you all spoke very eloquently, actually, to the 6 game changers of the NAACP. You touched on health and economics and the right to vote and education, and all that goes hand in hand with who the NAACP is and what we do. I think that we all have a responsibility, particularly to this Commonwealth, to ensure and assure that everybody has a seat at the table. I am extremely glad to hear of you all in your respective areas of work and elected offices that you're committed to that. We at the NAACP State Conference, we're turning the corner. We're going to be more visual, more aggressive in our actions concerning people of color. We are excited to bring our Latino brothers and sisters to the table as well. We need everyone. My hope is, as an organization being nonpartisan, that we can even capture some of our Republican friends and bring them to the table. I'm hopeful to that, because the fact of the matter is that we need all at the table. One of the things that I will speak to is the issue around COVID-19. I would be remiss if I didn't mention the fact that African Americans throughout this country are suffering greatly because of COVID-19. And I do believe, as one of our panelists said, we haven't seen anything yet. When this thing is long gone, we're still going to feel the effects of it. And so hopefully, we as a people we'll come together and understand that we need all hands on deck, particularly in the state of Pennsylvania. So on behalf of the Pennsylvania State Conference NAACP, I want to thank all that were involved in this town hall, our committee chair, Ms. McGruder, and of course her team, Ms. Shana Watson and her team, and the first vice president of the state conference, Mr. Blandon Watson. I want to thank you all. I want to thank all you that are in elected offices. I have not had the opportunity to meet you in person, but rest assured I'm going to. That is my goal and objective. And I would love if you would let us know what we could do more as a civil rights organization here in the state of Pennsylvania to impact and affect change. So again, on behalf of the Pennsylvania State Conference NAACP, I thank each and every one of you from the bottom of my heart, and I look forward to working with each and every one of you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, President Huston. This concludes our NAACP Pennsylvania State Conference Virtual Town Hall, where the focus is on the impact of COVID-19 on communities of color. We invite you to return next Thursday, same time at 6 p.m., where the focus will be labor and industry. So please share the information with your friends, your neighbors. Remember to get out the vote. Thanks again. God bless.
Thank you all again. Take care.